Hello everybody, I'm Krishna. Welcome to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I will run you through the different settings that I use for street photography using my Fuji X100v. Now, you have many genres of photography. You have landscape, portrait, architecture, sports, street photography, and many others. Now, each of them have their own challenges. When you go out for street photography, you have to be plugged into the environment. You need to be very vigilant on what is happening around you. And you should be ready with your camera with the right setting to take that fleeting moment and freeze it permanently in your sensor. So if you think about it, you only have a fleeting second to take that picture. And you wouldn't have time to compose your image, to adjust your ISO, your aperture, or your shutter speed, and even your focus. So you need to do all this very instinctively, which is where it becomes all the more important that you set your camera right so that you don't need to think about all this when the moment happens. For example, in this pic, I saw the little girl playing around in her father's shoe and her little brother running around. I had a split second to capture both of them in one frame. Here are a couple of pics of people engrossed in their mobile. If you keep your eyes open, you just can't miss seeing how obsessed people are with their mobile. Standing there in front of them and nailing the right setting will kill the spontaneous moment. And surely, if I had stopped and focused to take this person leaning on the McDonald's mascot, would surely have made him conscious. I had to take this in a split second. He knew about the shot, but hadn't realized how interesting he made the pic with his relaxed posture and the matching mask. This was another relaxed pose from a fruit vendor. He was sitting on one of the cartons and watching me take pics. He didn't become self-conscious because I never lifted the camera to my eyes. With practice, you know the field of vision of a 35mm lens. This is another example. All the three of them were in perfect tandem, marching forwards, wearing the mask the way they seemed fit. Here you just get an instinctive feeling that there could be something interesting and you just click without even raising the camera to your eyes. Now let us look at what are the settings that I use for the street photography. So let's start with the aperture. So if I am going to do the photography during the daytime, usually I put the aperture at f8. This gives me a longer range of acceptable focus. More on that in a little while. If I am doing street photography during the night where I have low light, then I may go as low as f2. Now the challenge with this is my range of acceptable focus area becomes drastically reduced, which means that I will show you how I do that setting. So depending on that setting, I need to be super clear that how far is my subject going to be from me. So with f2, the error that I can make is super low compared to f8. I will show you that in a little while. So a higher aperture gives you a lot more room for error where you will get a decently sharp photo. So now that we are done with aperture, so it is f8 during daytime mostly, and it is I go as low as f2 during nighttime. Now let's come to the shutter speed. Now shutter speed, I usually put it at 1/250 during daytime, and sometimes if it's cloudy I may go to 1/125. In the nighttime I generally put it at 1/125, and I may go a little lower, but that I don't go a lot lower because unless and otherwise I want some movement in the picture, and that's part of the composition. Otherwise usually I stick to 1/125 where I decently get still a focused picture, and during daytime I go to 1/250. Now if you look at it on the ISO, if I know the lighting condition that I'm going to get into, then I put it at C, where I know that I don't need to immediately react. Where I think that I have a little more time, then I put it at C, and then I control the what would be my ISO. But if I'm going into a situation where I have no clue what the lighting condition is going to be and how soon I need to react, I generally put it at auto and I leave it at that. This camera is pretty good at handling ISO. So even if the ISO goes quite high, I've found pretty decent pictures. So generally, if you look at it, I go as high as 1600, 2000, sometimes even 3000, and then I've found acceptable quality in this. So ISO is something that I put it in auto. As I was telling you, if I think that I need to quickly react to situations. However, if I want a specific kind of let's say strong shadows and bright highlights, and then I go position myself at a particular place, and then I probably wait for someone to walk through and etc. So there I have time for deliberation. So there I set up the ISO so that it doesn't bump up over the shadows. So there I do it, but otherwise I just put it in auto. We've covered aperture, we've covered shutter speed, we've covered ISO. The next thing comes to manual focus. So if you look at the focusing, I usually keep it in manual. I don't use the continuous or the single shot. The reason being, when you're doing street photography, you may have a lot of people walking in, or your subject could be somewhere further away, and you don't have time to focus and shoot. So you may just pick out your camera and take a shot. So if you leave it to the camera to decide, you never know whether the camera may pick up a subject which is quite nearby, and then assume that's what you want to focus on, and then you may lose your entire shot. So for that reason, I always use manual. And when I use manual, it obviously means that the focusing mode makes no sense to me. So whether it is a single point focus or whether it is a multi-point, it really doesn't matter, because I'm going to decide where the focus is going to be. Now I also use back button focus. So this is the button that I use. So my shutter doesn't focus. So when I click, it just clicks. It doesn't focus and then click. So I use the back button focus. So Fuji also gives an ability where you can put your focus completely in manual, and yet this button will work if you want to specifically focus. So because I use this sparingly, I normally use a single point focus. So if I am deliberately composing an image where I know that I am expecting a subject to come walk across a particular point, then I point the camera there, I press this button and I focus it, and I then leave it there, and then I wait for the right moment. Otherwise, most of my photos, if you look at it, I keep walking and then I take it in an instant. So at those points of time, I really don't have time even to press this or to compose. I may not even take the camera up to my eye. So there I use something called range focus. So if you see here, you can, this is the distance between the camera and the subject. So it starts from 0.1 meter to, it goes up to 10 meters to infinity, right? Now you can if you can see a small blue next below the, if you can see a small blue below the 3, I will probably increase the aperture. If I put it to f16, then the blue line will increase. Now if you can see it, the blue line is a little before 3 meters and a little after 5 meters. So what this tells you is, if your subject comes anywhere between a little before 3 meters up to a little after 5 meters, your subject will be in acceptable focus. So the subject would be sharp enough. So the advantage here is I just don't need to think. If I would, before I set out of my photography, I would have set the aperture in such a way and this distance in such a way that I don't need to think. If I know this subject is walking towards me and is 3 feet away, I just click and I know that person was in focus. Now this blue line, that is the acceptable level, is also dependent on what aperture that you are setting in. So if I make the aperture to f8, if you see, that blue line has also become smaller. So what this means is the error rate increases, which is why I said earlier, if you keep the aperture at 2, then this line becomes really small, which means you need the subject to come exactly at that point for you to keep the person in focus. Whereas if you're dealing with a larger aperture, then this line also becomes quite big. As you see, it becomes quite big, so you know that you have a lot more room. So if the person is in this particular case, if you look at it, it is between a little before 5 to up to 10. So I know that if a person comes around this, if the person or the subject, or if I move towards the subject, and if it is around this distance, then the person would be in acceptable focus. And that I set by rotating the focus ring. So that's how I use the range focus, and it's super helpful. And without this, it's practically very difficult for you to take photos quickly and discreetly. Hi there, if you've come this far, thank you very much for watching this video. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do so. Thank you very much.